for joining us for episode 2 of the Vibe With Us podcast, where voices are heard, stories are shared, and vision is defined. Today's episode, we'll be talking about coming back to church and how relationships can affect our spiritual walk. Today's hosts are Dave Shinoni and Jessica Whitcomb.
Welcome to Vibe With Us. I'm here tonight with Jessica Whitcomb, and I am Dave Shinoni, and we are here to have a conversation with one of our leaders who has come a long way since I've known her, and I would love for everybody else to get to know her tonight. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. That was very sweet.
You're
You're going to make me cry already.
Yeah, I get the tissues ready. That's one of my
specialties, by the way. If you don't know me,
Making people cry.
that's what I do.
I'm going to need it. I'm going to need it. We'll put it right here.
It's so funny.
How many times have tears happened in conversations?
So many times.
Almost every
Yeah,
time.
almost every time. Yeah.
I don't enjoy making people cry. It just happens.
No, but it's a good thing, honestly. It's like a good emotional release. You know, you can really tell you're a counselor by the fact that everybody cries in front of you, you know?
I guess it's a good thing, if those are happy tears or tears of like relief.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Hopefully they're not like, my goodness, tears.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing will ever be as bad as like my first therapy session where I literally could not stop crying. And my therapist was like genuinely shocked. She was like,
Oh,
she was visibly like, "Are you okay?" Like, she
Oh.
actually told me, "I've never seen somebody cry so much." I'm like, Sorry.
man.
And she's a counselor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she couldn't even keep a straight face. She was like genuinely shocked that I was crying so much. I'm like,
Oh, well.
"I'm sorry."
At least she's honest. I respect that.
Yeah, that's how I knew she was a keeper.
Yeah, tears are healthy. Everybody watching. Cry. It will help you. I used to be one of those people who do not cry. I was actually like known for not crying, which is a bad reputation. Now I cry all the time, like a little baby. The closer I get with Jesus, I just can't help it. It melts my heart. So Jessica, I wanted to ask you a couple questions tonight.
Oh, just a couple?
Just a couple questions, right?
One of the things I was curious about was what brought you to church? What brought you to, church in general? Like, when did you start serving the Lord?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in church. My dad is technically a pastor. He went to Bible college. Both my parents grew up in church. So it's kind of runs in the family. Yeah, I was a church kid. Ever since I can remember, we've been going to church. But yeah, we've bounced around to a couple different churches here in town. I grew up here. We've lived here my whole life. So I've always grown up in church. Yeah.
Did you, growing up, ever have a time where you kind of went away from church or church life?
Yeah, well, I tell people now that like when I was younger, it didn't really count because I was physically in church, but I wasn't spiritually in church. Like I was there and I was serving and I was going to youth group, going to Sunday school, singing the songs, learning the Bible verses, but my heart wasn't in it. It's just something I did. And then like when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, we changed churches really abruptly, and really it was a dramatic change for me because I grew up in this church. I grew up going to this church for so many years. And then my family decided that it was time for us to change churches, and it was in the fall of my senior year of high school. So like, I felt like, why are we doing this now when I feel like I need to be connected to people more than ever, and I'm getting ripped away from the only home really that I know. And so yeah, we changed churches. I've already forgotten the question that you asked.
No, this is actually where I was going to take it anyway.
So,
But,
because it's important.
yeah. And I felt like, so then in my senior year, it was like I met a guy and he wasn't a Christian and I was super sheltered. Like, disclaimer, I grew up super sheltered. Maybe not as sheltered as some other Christian kids, but I was pretty sheltered. Met a guy at my first job that I ever had. And then really like in the spring of my senior year of high school, I still went to church every Sunday with my family, but I really felt like started to go even further away from God. And then it was during pretty much my entire college career of 4.5 years. I wasn't really, like I was calling myself a Christian still.
And you were dating this guy.
And I was dating this guy this whole time, yeah. But I moved to Monterey halfway through college and I didn't even go to church. So like that was the biggest change. Like
How
because
long were you not?
for 2 years. For 2 years, which was a big deal for somebody who grows up in church, goes to Sunday church every week, with the exception of like a vacation every now and then. And then it was so easy for me to not go to church because I was with this guy, because my life was so wrapped up in this relationship, because I was away from home. I was away from the accountability. So I quickly I didn't like realize it right away. Of course, it took a long time for me to realize
I wanted to
it.
ask you that, like,
So this was a gradual thing.
Yeah, it was very
wasn't just,
gradual.
like,
And it was
overnight.
like not one of those moments where like the enemy comes in and flips a switch. It was like one of those slow processes where it was like, oh, oh yeah, I'm gonna undermine her desire to join a youth group. And so that's where it started for me, where it's like we came here to New Life the fall of my senior year of high school. I refused to go to youth group because I was in my senior year. I knew I wasn't gonna know anybody. I didn't want to feel left out and feel like, oh, I'm joining this group and everybody knows each other already. What's the point? So I told myself that, and I felt like that's really where the seed was planted for like falling away from God. Like I didn't join youth group, so I didn't really have a solid Christian community anymore. Senior year and then freshman, sophomore year of college, I just went to school, went to work, went to church on Sunday. And that was my life. And then because I was so invested in this relationship with this guy, it was so much easier to, when I moved away from Monterey, or moved to Monterey, away from this accountability of living at home, being around church, I stopped going to church. It just like was something that just became normal for me over time. So it was like a slow pulling away, for
Wow.
sure.
And then, so you were with this person for 2 years, 4 years.
4 years. This is like the thing that I always dread telling people, is because it's so abnormal for somebody so young. But I
No,
was,
It's not.
I feel like it is though. I feel like, okay, so this is part of the shame that was always attached to this part of my story, was like, I was with this guy for 4 years and it shouldn't have lasted that long. You know, it's like that was always a part that I did get healing from, was like the shame attached to that. But I was 17 to 21. Those were the years. And it was like, yeah.
Those are very important years.
Yeah.
They're vital to like our foundation.
Yeah, you're literally going through an identity crisis during those years of your life. And that's definitely what happened to me. Like, as soon as somebody turned their attention toward me, I was like, yes, yes, I like this feeling of like, you know, I like this attention from this person. Yes, I'm going to go after it. And if you know me at all, you know that like I go for things like 100%. Like I'm totally invested. I love my people. I love my people almost to a fault, where I will like totally invest my life in people. But it was like just it was like the enemy saw that I was like ripe for the picking. Like I was super in a transitional state of my life, like senior year of high school, super big transition going into college. And all my friends were going away to college too. I was one of the few people that stayed home in Novato to go to junior college. And so it was like everything was being taken away from me. All the accountability in my life was being taken away from me. And then my entire life became this one person.
Wow. This is actually quite a few people's stories who grow up in church. It seems like not everybody, obviously, but a lot of us at that age, 17 to 19, 20, 21, it's like there's a transition of, hey, you grew up in church, you obviously experienced, things with God, and you know the Word, you hear the Scripture, you've had encounters at camps probably, or services, whatever. And then there's this kind of like, hey, you're on your own. I almost feel like God, for me, I remember being 19 and I remember feeling like I was no longer under my parents' covering.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could feel God speaking to my heart about like, hey, it's not about your parents anymore. It's about you and me. And if you want a relationship with me, I'm here. But you're on your own. Like it's about us. Like
Yeah.
and I definitely think a lot of us who grew up in church can get numb to church because we hear throughout. If you go to church for years, you're going to hear sometimes the scriptures, the same scriptures, and same worship songs and the same people, and it becomes a routine in our life.
Yeah, it becomes a routine. It becomes normalized to the point of where like you don't even really have to think about it, and that's almost a danger.
It is.
Like you don't have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
When you're growing up going to church with your family, you don't have to choose to go to church. You just go.
Exactly.
You just do it.
It's not your choice.
Yeah. And then, like, especially if you have friends there at church, it's like, oh, I'm going because of my friends. You know, that's something for young people too. Like, it's a great gateway. It's a great open door to get people to church is, oh, I'm going to go there to hang out with my friends. But really, it's that intentionality, that choice. Like, I'm going to church because I love God.
Yeah.
And I want to be with his people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. That's a really good point because I going to church, being so my dad was a pastor, I'm going there because I have to serve, and my intention is to serve and then be done. And that's the way, unfortunately, I started to look at church was a place of like that's where I have to go work.
Yeah.
But also deep down in my heart, I wanted to know God and I wanted an encounter with Him, but because my intentions were in other areas, my priorities. It's interesting, especially when you're young, your priorities are all over the place.
Oh, yeah. They change from day to
They
day.
change from day to day.
Yeah.
And so many people get kind of swept up into that transition time when you're in your teens to becoming an adult. And you kept mentioning the enemy and how he comes in. And it's funny how he attacks people's identities. The Bible talks about him being the accuser, and he comes in and he tries to accuse you of things and to attack who you are, and so that you don't know who you are. And then the next thing you do is you feel guilty because he accused you.
Yeah.
Oh, you sinned. So you knew the truth, Jessica. You grew up in church, and here you are. You turned your back on God, and now you're not worthy coming back.
Yeah, I like that you said that, like the accuser, because even still today, like God is revealing new things to me about this time in my life. And when you were saying those words, it's reminded me that like there was a point at which I can't quantify when it was, but there was a point in those 4 years when I was like turning away from God, where it was like I was listening to the voice that said, you're pretending to be a Christian. So why are you even pretending? You should just stop pretending and just go fully this other direction. And I made that choice. I made that choice to like just not even go to church to pretend to be a Christian, to keep up the facade. I was like, I was with this guy and I made him my life. And so then I just kind of even gave up like the whole calling myself a Christian, where it's like, I'm not even going to go to church. I'm not even going to like act the part. I'm just going to commit fully because I know I'm pretending, kind of thing.
Wow. That's so many. See, that's not like unrare. Like a lot of people, it may not be the exact story, but a lot of people experience those feelings who grew up in church and experienced things in church, and it became normal, and then they leave for a time, and it's so hard for them to come back. And then also, I think one of the things that people get hit with is they're people that they have as an influence in their life. Your friends that don't know church are going to paint it as, oh yeah, that's bad. Yeah, society kind of paints church in a bad light.
Yeah.
And so if you have people in your life who are talking about, or you're explaining like, yeah, I grew up in church, but I don't want to go anymore. They're going to encourage you like, well, yeah, try other things, and you do, and it seems like it never
Do what makes you happy.
Exactly, it feels good, right? Okay, do that.
Yeah.
But I actually did that, and I felt. So here's a funny thing. I think I said this last. I'm not going to say it again. But last podcast, I talked a little bit about what Donnie Moore would say about Salem. But when I went through those times where I was looking for something else, I was coming running from God.
Yeah.
I tried things, and it honestly, in the beginning, Jess, it felt fun, and it was new.
Yeah.
It's the thrill.
It's the thrill of new and fun, but. And then later on, it was making me feel empty.
Yeah.
And I just kept feeling more and more and more empty. And I had to really take a look at like, who am I really? Like and I think some of the people maybe like watching right now could be in different places in their life. They could be a solid, and that's where we are today. Like we know who we are, but they could be looking for that answer that we're all looking for. Like spiritually, who are we? Who is God? And how did you get you got from there, right? Where you had gotten out of church, been dating somebody for 4 years, and now today, you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
And you're actually a teacher. And God has like fulfilled those things in your life, those things that you're called to. and you're a leader in our church, and you serve in so many different areas, and God uses you in a mighty way. And how did that happen? So what were the things that you did? Like, when did you come back?
Yeah, so a few months before, well, for context, because context is important, this was 5 years ago now, okay?
Right.
Just saying, 5 years have passed. But yeah, in the spring of 2016, I was set to graduate in May. I was still with the boyfriend at the time, and then um, I'm laughing because it's like, I always feel like it's awkward to talk about, but in, what was it, like February or March or something of my senior year of college, I found out he was cheating on me, and it was a big betrayal for me because I consider myself a trusting person, and it's like, 4-year relationship, you think you love this person, you think they love you, all this other stuff was going on in my head. I was, so many reasons why I was blinded, but yeah, so found out he was cheating on me. He broke up with me, and then this was like 2 months before I was supposed to graduate from college, and really like came to a really broken place in my life. Like I've lived a sheltered childhood, so I've never really experienced, like anything remotely like traumatizing or anything in my life. But that was really a really low point in my life. And so it was like everything was like falling apart because I made this person the focus of my life.
Yeah.
I felt so empty and broken when it was taken away from me.
So wait.
Yeah.
He cheated on you.
Yeah.
And you still stayed with him.
Okay, so let's clarify. There's a timeline of events. So I found out he was cheating on me, and then immediately, because I thought I thought I loved him, I was ready to forgive him and stay with him. And then a couple days later, after like talking through things, he broke up with me. So like that was another part of like the healing that had to happen in my life, was like, well, why would you stay with somebody? Why would you even forgive somebody who cheated on you? Like I could do a whole other talk on that at a different time. But like, no, I wanted to stay with him because I thought it was love.
Yeah.
This is love. No, it's not.
Well,
But-
this is important. I know it's personal,
Yeah.
but it's real, because there's people
Let's get into it.
in this scenario right now,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's the whole point of what we're doing, is we want to like be kind of transparent on the things, like who we are.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I was growing up, you go to church, you see the people that are in leadership, and you look at them and you're like, you think they don't never go through any problems, or they're almost superhuman, but they're just people.
Yeah.
In every scenario, you can look at the royal family. Right now we're in a time.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not gonna get into it, but like that's they're a royal family, but they're still a family. They're just people,
Yeah,
and
still
they're
got
going
their
through a
problems.
whole lot of problems and stuff.
Yeah.
And some people are just shocked and put them on a pedestal. I don't know why we do that as people, but the Jessica that you are today
Mm-hmm.
had to go through, or didn't have to, but those things you went through have helped build a foundation and helped your identity and who you are as a daughter of God, and a leader and a teacher and a wonderful friend, an amazing person who is here today. But all those things you went through, that's not who you are. Those are things that you went through.
Yeah, and that's what I want to tell anybody who's like still going through that healing process today, or is still in that recovery process, or is like still in kind of the rubble of things, is that it's really easy to believe and listen to the lie that says that this thing that happened to you, or this circumstance in your life that got taken away from you, is now defining you. It's now like, this is my life, this is, and it's so easy to let that dictate your future, which for me, for a long time afterwards, it did, because like I was so broken and empty. And then it took a long time of like relearning God's love for me and recommitting my life to Christ in order to really recover. And so, but there's a process to it for sure.
Yeah, and so like your first step, right? Obviously, what did you do? Because that took time, obviously. So you started coming back to church.
Yeah, because I moved back home after graduating from college, and I was still kind of like in a haze. You know how like you're like going through something and you're kind of on the outside, you're kind of acting like it's okay because you don't even want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I was kind of still in that haze when I moved back home. And then obviously because my family still goes to church every Sunday, you know, that I started going to this church every Sunday with my family. And it was like, yeah, it was just, it took a few months really for me to like fully be vulnerable with God, and like, you know, open up my heart to him again. Cause that's what really ended up happening is, um, I had to open my heart up to him again because I had put this person in the highest place of my life where God should have been, and then kind of like forgot about God. Although he didn't forget about me, he was still there with me. It's just I didn't put him in that place of priority in my life. And then it took like a few months, I would say even like up to 2 years of me walking out my faith, going to church, listening to worship music, praying, talking to people about my stuff, just like not even that specific event, but just talking to people in general and surrounding myself with the right people. It's very easy to be isolated when you're recovering from something like that.
Yeah.
And that is like where the enemy wants you, is in isolation, because then that leads to anxiety and depression. For me, it led to anxiety,
Yeah.
and like not wanting to open up myself to people. But as soon as I started opening up my heart to God again, it made it that much easier to open up to people too,
Wow.
and really go through that healing process and really recommit my life to Christ. So it's like, yeah, it's so good when you open up your heart to God and he knows all your stuff. He knows your heart too. He
Yeah.
knows, like, he can meet you in that broken place of where it's like, God, I feel so empty. And he's like, well, I want to fill you up,
Yeah.
you know, and he's the only one that can really fill you up.
It's funny because growing up, obviously in church, you saw people doing things like that, you know, worshiping and talking to people. But there's something about surrendering all your stuff, like that you've put in your life, right?
Yeah.
And all the junk or whatever it is, right? And going, hey God, I'm gonna bring this to you. Even though you grew up in church, you may not have done that.
Mm-hmm.
As for me in my life too, like I've learned to do that on a regular basis. And it is really one of the keys to helping grow your relationship with God is being vulnerable with him. And it's as simple as taking that first step, going to church or stepping into a place where you can worship him and putting that stuff kind of at his feet.
Yeah.
And surrendering. You're like, God, I don't want to carry this anymore, because there's always going to be that enemy in the back of the mind, you know, kind of saying, don't do that. You've done that before. It didn't work. It didn't work back then. Look at where you are now.
Yeah.
You know?
Or don't talk to these people about this
Yeah.
because they're
Or
going to
they
look
don't
at you
like
differently. Yeah.
Just let me tell you something. Anybody watching,
You go into church and you first thing that goes in your mind, nobody likes me here. Nobody's nice. And you start to feel like, you know, critical or unwelcome. I want you to do something. Do the opposite. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Break that and act as if it's the opposite. Act as if everybody's nice to you. Act as if everybody loves you, everybody wants you there.
Yeah.
Because let me tell you, the enemy doesn't want you there. And your breakthrough is going to come. God says if you seek him, you're going to find him. You will find him. You going to church and stepping out and being vulnerable is looking for him and looking for, you know, who he is, because God wants to be in our lives.
Yeah.
We really have forgotten like the fundamentals of being a Christian, like the simple things of praying, worshiping, going to church, fellowship.
Yeah. Read your Bible.
Read your Bible, like so vital, right? But we like look for all these other things now. We look at all these other things that can help us, and they don't help. Like it's weird. It's weird how we do this, especially when we grow up in church and we knew it was right there in front of us the whole time. And I really think that your story, your testimony, is honestly it's a lot of people's scenarios. Like it may be different, but we all kind of go through this time in our life, and some people didn't grow up in church, didn't know, and this is all new, and it's like, whoa, it's awesome right off the bat, or it's not, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there are people out there, especially when you get in a relationship with somebody, it becomes your priority, the thing that you're putting before your relationship with God, and your relationship with God is so vital to your life. It is your life. It's everything. And it's funny how we can fall for the little like Eve in the Bible, you know, Satan came to her and was tempting her with this like fruit.
Yeah.
It looked pretty. It was like, ooh, this looks great.
Little did she know it was low hanging
It
fruit.
was- well, he didn't just say it. She did. Oh man, but like it's funny. We're still like that,
Yeah,
Like we're
totally.
still looking for that pretty fruit. It's gonna give us.
Well, because like no matter how tough you want to act, no matter how you want to look on the outside, we all crave that love.
Yeah.
And we assign certain things to the idea of love, and we say, oh, that looks like love to me, so I'm going to go for it. I'm going to reach out for it. Or like that person is nice to me, so I'm going to, put all I have into this relationship with this person. Or the opposite is true too, this is not how I feel loved, so I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to go somewhere else for it.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
He's
Yeah.
right there, waiting to love you. God's right there. He loves us, and the biggest lie that we ever said is that he doesn't love you, and that you're not enough, and that he judges you, he hates you, and all this. It's like, no, God's waiting there to fill you up, and it's real. It does require like us to step out in faith and make those first couple steps and walk through the door and worship and surrender your heart to Him. It does take that, but when you do, you will find it. And it's funny how many now encounters that you've had with God and like people, when you do those things, He restores and He brings all the things that you dream and hope for, and He brings it His way, which is better, obviously. I know when we first started talking and having you like come around, and I was coming here and being in Vibe, and remember you were talking about being a teacher and how important that was for you, and it was a dream, and then COVID hits.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, looks like, it's not exactly like the ideal time to be a teacher. But what's funny is God knew that you were going to be a teacher. That's part of who you are. And He called you to this time to be one.
Mm-hmm.
And He knew that you could do it. And you're there now with these kids in a vital time of their life when they're going through so much, and you've been through so much, but it's actually made you stronger.
Yeah.
It's actually equipped you to be able to help these kids. David in the Bible was a shepherd, and he had to protect his flock, right? He's protecting a bunch of sheep, and there's lions and bears coming to take out his sheep. And as a young boy, he had to fight those bears. And then here he has his tribe, right? Who he's protecting against the Philistines, against Goliath. And he was ready.
Yeah.
Like God prepared him through those times of taking care of sheep all by himself out there in the fields, in the middle of the night, whatever it is. God prepared him. He prepared you through all the things you went through. See, this is what God does. God takes those things in our life that we look at as bad, or, us going through something hard, a trial, and we wish it never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And He turns it around and He uses it for good. And He actually makes you stronger because of it. And because of that, you're now able to help young people who are looking for identity, looking for a relationship maybe in an unhealthy way, and you're able to guide them and say, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to look for another person's approval to fulfill like love, because there's something greater out there. There's a love that never ends, that has no conditions. It's God's love is so good. And honestly, now that I'm a dad, it's much easier for me to comprehend it. I knew it before I was a dad, but having my daughter and seeing her and the unconditional love, and I think about God's love for us, and it is so much greater. It's like the word that I'm using just can't touch it.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about this, because something that one of the bigger encounters that I had with God in these past few years was when, I think it was a couple of years ago, I guess, and I was still like feeling, I was still like healing from, what this event in my life. And on a Sunday, they sang this song, Pieces by Bethel. And it's like one of my go-to worship songs now because of its meaning to me in my healing process. It's like, the bridge talks about like your love's not fractured. It's not a troubled mind. It's not anxious. And it's like, sometimes it's good to know what love is not, to compare it to, what you have in your life. And you're when you're lining up God's love, and you're lining up God's love with, a relationship or a friendship or something like that. And obviously nothing is going to compare to God's love. But when you look at God's love and you see what it's not, it's so easy to be like, yes, I want that. You know, God's love does not say that you're not good enough. God's love does not make you more anxious. God's love does not, you know, leave you feeling empty.
Yeah.
God's love doesn't make you question everything about yourself. Like, am I doing this right? Am I saying the right things? Am I doing the right things? Am I looking how I'm supposed to look? Am I saying something in the right way? God's love doesn't do that.
Yeah.
God's love sees you for who you are
Yeah.
and accepts you no matter what. It's unconditional,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
With people, it's so easy to be like, I think as much as we try to have unconditional love for each other, there's always going to be something, I think, because we're so imperfect, because we have expectations, because we have, you know, these ideas as people. But God's love is unconditional.
It's so good. It's so true. Like, we try.
Yeah.
You know, I know I try really hard, but man, you know, there are times it's like, well, I love you, but you know, you need to love me too.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you need to spend time with me.
Yeah.
See, it's funny because when we love God in that way, though, like when you spend time with Him, it's like a light goes off. And you're like, oh my goodness, there's so much love available.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants the time, like that we are all alone and spending with Him, worshiping and praying and reading the Word. That's where you're gonna find that love.
Yeah. It never runs out.
It never runs out. And people, we look. I think the world is looking for love in so many different ways. And that would be the title of this: looking for love.
Mm-hmm.
You were looking for love this whole time.
Yeah.
You're looking for God this whole time.
Yeah.
And you looked in one way, and it led you to. I was gonna say astray, because ultimately no. Because here you are today, and you have victory, and you're an amazing person. You're a leader, and you're serving, and you're a teacher, and you're gonna be more. And you have God's love. You have fulfilled like who you are now. It's like we're never done growing.
Mm-hmm.
You're never like, hey, you're Jessica this. It's like, you're Jessica, you're God's daughter, and He loves you unconditionally.
Yeah.
And He has mighty things He wants to do in your life. And He made you for such a time as this. He made you for 2020 COVID, 2021 victory,
Mm-hmm.
you know, revival. We're having it, we're seeing it, and it's for everybody. And they just have to take those first steps, those vulnerable steps, to cancel the lies that we hear in our head, to cancel our thoughts of us not being enough or we don't feel accepted. You have to take that brave step of stepping out in faith and walking through the doors and surrendering to God. And because He wants you, and we want, like, we care. Like, the closer I get to God, the more love I have for people. That's why, like, it's talking about crying.
True. Yeah.
It's funny you brought up that, because I didn't cry growing. You know, I really was like known for trying to be brave and not crying. And it's so funny because, like, the closer I dive in towards God, it's He just breaks me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and not in a bad way. He breaks the things that I need broken off.
Yeah.
Those things that aren't.
He
good.
breaks the bondage.
He does, yeah, and He sets you free.
Yeah.
And I feel free, and you're free.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know me, who didn't know me before this, like, it's a good comparison. Like, I was so shy and quiet and like inside myself all the time that, like, it's funny. Tabby told me a couple of times, she's told me a couple of times now that, like, she's somebody I'm super close to. And she told me the first interaction she had with me when I, like, first moved back here to the church, she thought I was, like, angry all the time and didn't want to be around people. And I'm like, whoa, that's scary, because that's not who I am today. I hope not. You know, it's like when it's like God really, when He does that healing in your heart, He really does change you from the inside out. And then it shows up in your life. You know, you start to grow in friendships again. You start to, like, reach out to people. You start to, like, take those leaps of faith again. Like, I would not be here today talking on this podcast if I was, still going, if I was still, away from God. Yeah. I would not be in my place of work now if it wasn't for that happened and this growth that happened. So I just want to encourage anybody who's, like, feeling like the growth is so slow. For me, it was slow too, but it was so worth it, because I feel like with me, God took His time because it was worth it. Yeah. And sometimes it's going to happen slowly. Sometimes it happens fast. Sometimes it does happen fast. But I feel like sometimes God does it slow and it's intentional for a reason.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I love that you're talking about this because I personally have found that when the way you perceive people based on the outside and based on the way they may be presenting themselves, most of the time
It's not true.
it's not true.
Yeah.
Especially in a setting of church.
Mhm.
And I love that you're talking about that right now. I think that if like I have learned, if I'm the person who's willing to step in, and as I have been able to like talk to you, Jess, and I could see like, because God, He gives us His eyes to see, and it's like I could see who you really were, but not all of us look like with God's eyes. We look from our perspective. You know, one of the things I've worked on, and just in my relationship, is trying to have His heart all the time, 24/7, and with that comes His eyes and His ears.
Yeah.
And so when you look at somebody, you look at them differently. And like right off the bat, like I knew like who you were, and you were very reserved. You were quiet. I definitely didn't think you were angry. But
Sometimes I have that resting face, like it's just there.
I have it too. Trust me, we all have it. But like it's funny though. Like I knew, because just I could see the light. I could see the light that God had put in you, and now it's really like everybody sees it. It's apparent. You're actually sharing your testimony. You're speaking, and like this helps people. We need to hear these things when we're going through our own stuff.
Yeah.
And this may be different from people that are listening right now. You may have a different scenario, but there's somebody else who might be listening. But one of the things you can get out of this is the key is, hey, no matter what you're going through, God loves you. His love is greater than you could ever imagine, but it takes you having to take that step.
Yeah, it's a choice.
It is a choice.
Yeah.
It's your intention. Is your intention to go into church and be mad at God? Then you'll be mad at God. If my intention is to go into church and to not talk to anybody because nobody likes me, then sometimes it'll happen. But what happens with God is He'll throw in people who are willing to break down that wall, and He'll put people in your life when you go seek Him who can help you, because we all have like those wounds, and God has definitely healed those wounds. In my life, I can speak for myself, and I see it in you. I've seen the change. Yes, I've seen God take you from a quiet person who's reserved to now who's like on stage sharing her testimony, leading in our young adults group, and taking people out and like bringing life to them through and showing them who God is and what He's done in your life. And that's why I really appreciate you opening up about this, because I know it's definitely vulnerable to share these things, but it's really important because we all are like going through things in our life, and we need each other right now.
Yeah.
And this stuff helps. It helps me. It helps you. It helps others. And that's the whole that's the thing about going to church that I never tapped into was there's help. There is love. There's things that are just beyond serving. And it's like now, yes, obviously I'm still serving, but it feeds like my spirit. Like I feel filled. God fills me up. And that's for all of us. He wants to do that. So if there's anybody watching tonight and you have been in a relationship, or you have maybe just felt rejection and you've been looking for something more, God is there for you, and He wants to meet you where you're at.
Yeah, and He wants you to choose Him. He's already chosen you. We have to choose Him.
Yeah, and you just have to have the right intention. Your intention is, hey, just find Him. Look, ask that question. Say, Jesus, I want to meet you. I want you in my life. You may not even believe that He's real. Ask Him. Ask Him to show up. Ask Him to show up in your life, and He will. I have enough faith to know that He does that because He did it in my life, and I've seen it in many other lives, all around us. So here at New Life Church, we are just really trying to share who Jesus is, that love that He has for people. And I really feel like we're in a season where we have an opportunity to do that. When there's storms outside and there's COVID and there's all these other things, it's the time for us to be a light.
Yeah.
And one of those ways is to share like our testimonies and our stories. So thank you, Jessica, for
Thank
your
you.
story and your testimony. I know it's just a small piece, but it's powerful. So would you mind like praying us
Yeah.
out and just sending it?
Sure. Yeah, God, thank you for Pastor Dave and trusting me to tell my testimony. And God, I thank you for anybody who's watching who can relate to any part of what we've been talking about tonight. God, I just thank you for those people who have chosen to watch this, who have chosen to listen to your words, God. I ask you to give them the courage to choose you now, God, to ask you to come into their hearts, God, because we know it's a daily thing, God. We have to daily choose you, and we have to daily walk out in faith towards the free gift that you're offering to us, God. And I just thank you for anybody who needs healing in their life from hurt, just from any kind of hurt, God. I just pray that you reveal your healing and your love, your wraparound love in their lives, God. That you just come in and you comfort them. And you show them what real love is, God, because you made it. You are love. You are the purest kind of love, and we just thank you for it in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you guys for watching or listening. God bless you. We send that prayer out to you, and come find God's love.